Good evening, everyone. I am Keisha Ann Mullings Brown of Good Courage, and I welcome you tonight to the presentation for Bitter or Sweet Sex in Marriage, addressing abortion. And we're very pleased to have you here with us. This evening, we have our presenter, Barbara Vescovo. Barbara is a passionate and empathetic advocate for the restoration of post-abortive individuals because she shares their story. She began serving at a newly formed pregnancy center as a patient care advocate in 2005 and later became certified as an abortion recovery facilitator. For more than 10 years, Barbara has led abortion recovery groups and implemented post-abortion programs. In 2015, Barbara volunteered at O'Brien Medical Clinic, formerly PRC of Gwinnett, and joined the staff a year later as the patient services manager. She is an active member of the Bridge Church in Lawrenceville, and that's in Georgia for those of you logging on from outside of the country, and highly involved with the women's ministry. Barbara resides in Peachtree Corners, Georgia, with her husband and daughter. And it was through the Bridge Church that I was introduced to Barbara and the work that she does. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to Barbara Vescovo.
Thank you, Keisha Ann. I appreciate that. As she stated before, this particular topic we are about to embark upon is quite sensitive and is also considered very controversial and divisive. But first, let me establish that there are no hidden agendas here. Please be aware the intent is never to convey the message as judgmental, condemning, or even to persuade, but only to inform. So how did abortion come about? What was the catalyst behind it all? Slide, please. If I may have the slide. Yes. We've often used the term, there is nothing new under the sun. And actually, you'll see that this quote actually comes from the Bible in Ecclesiastes 1:9. What has been will be again. What has been done will be done again. There is nothing new under the sun. So this is actually saying that the era we are now in, what we're witnessing, everything that's going on around us concerning abortion itself, that's nothing new. That has been going on for quite a while. So let's take a brief history. Let's look at some history here. Actually, it's frozen. Keisha, may I have the next slide, please? How did it all start? Next slide. Well, scholars have been spending decades researching this. Where did abortion start? What was its origin? And they have discovered one thing, that ever since women have been having abortions for this has been going on as long as history has existed. As a matter of fact, it all started, they have found, next slide, it all started, the very first recorded history of abortion was way back in 50 BC in ancient Egypt. And at that time, Keisha's hurrying me along. Thank you, Keisha. They weren't abortion at that time was on it was non-surgical procedures, and it wasn't until much later on that it became more invasive. And abortion also now in our era is presented as this new cutting edge scientific product of the modern era. But as you can see, no, it's been going on for quite a while. Even in, next slide, the Grecian or Greek Empire, as well as, next slide, the Roman Empire. And how did they find out this? Well, the Romans and the Greeks, they a lot of plays and were written, and a lot of well-known physicians. You may know one, or philosopher known as Hippocrates. He actually recorded some of these things that were happening. So much of what is known now about the methods and practice of abortion in the Greek and Roman history actually came from classical texts, believe it or not. So, next slide. Even in China, in the early 3000 BCs, that's been going on. So let's just take a pause and embrace this, that this abortion has been going on for a long, long, long time around the world. It's not just significant to America, which brings me to the next slide. It was introduced, as far as the records are concerned, in the early 16 and 1800s during colonization and slavery times. And they came up with ways to terminate pregnancies. And like I said, most of it, they found different kind of plants to use, all kinds of things. Some women were convinced these physical activity, do a lot of jumping up and down. They even bound the women's stomachs sometimes to terminate a pregnancy. But these types of practices weren't really frowned upon. It was kind of like a normalcy, if you would. But then something happened as this progressed. Abortions then became illegal in the late 1800s because when the more invasive type practices were introduced, they were finding that a lot of women were losing their lives because of unsterile instruments, just the environment itself, infection, and all of that. So next slide. Abortion became legalized in 1973, however. And you're like, well, what actually happened? Go back to the next slide, please, Keisha. And thank you. It was legalized in 1973 through Roe versus Wade. Now, I want you to take notice that the Supreme Court did not invent legal abortion, much less abortion itself. But like as you have seen history, this was all handed down. And abortion, both legal and illegal, has been a part of America for a very, very long time. So let's look at some numbers. Because of this, what's happening? So in Georgia, as you can see from the Guttmacher Institute, they've been tracking abortions, not even since 1973, but they wanted to show, since the legalization of abortion, those that were reported, what were the numbers looking like? So as you can see, between 1973 to 2019, there has been an average of over 36,000 abortions just in the state of Georgia alone. Next slide. In the United States, there's over 3,753 abortions daily, over 1,300,000 yearly. And out of the 1,370,000, 250,000 abortions are from individuals who claim to be of church affiliation. Next slide. So when you add that all up from the year 1973 up until at least 2017, and I'll even say 2018 at this point, more than 50 million lives have been lost through abortion. So what does that, to give you, try to help us to try to wrap our heads around that number. Next slide, please. We're going to look at just the population in 2019 according to the United States Census, the number of living people in a state. So in the state of Georgia, there are over, as you can see, 10 million people in 2019, 10 million people that populate the state of Georgia, as well as over 21 million in Florida and over 10 million in North Carolina. So if you were to add up those three states alone, that's over 40 million people that occupy the state. Over 40 million that occupy a state, and we're trying to get some kind of comparison. What does 50 million lives lost look like? So we can say we can take those lost lives and create at least 3 or 4 states in the United States to fill up those spaces. Next slide. So you may ask yourself, so why is what is the big significance of showing us all those numbers and charts? And I personally don't like charts and numbers, but it helps me. What I was trying to get you to see, I want us to get an idea of the number of individuals that are potentially affected by the abortion decision. And Keisha Ann, if you would go back to that 50 million for just a minute, I wanted to expound a little bit. Here we go, thank you. So if we take these 50 million lives that have been lost, that represents 50 million individuals had that made that abortion decision. Along with that means a woman had to be involved, and a man, because of course he had to impregnate her. So we're just going to double that and say at least 100 million men and women are affected by their abortion decision. However, there is a caveat to this. Not all individuals, just because they made that abortion decision, are affected, but a great number are. So Keisha Ann, if you would forward back to the men and women chart. Thank you. So how are they affected? Based on attending classes, and those women also involved in my group and other classes through the years, and men as well. Surveys have been done, and it's unfortunately that the men kind of are forgotten in the whole process. So they don't have a whole lot of information on the men themselves, but what they could gather is still helpful. So as you can see, there are emotional, psychological, behavioral changes that occur between both men and women when abortion is involved, such as anger and rage, helplessness, their changed view in God, especially if they have Christian backgrounds or whatever, they see God differently. Violence and confusion about masculinity, and the same thing with women, a confusion about their femininity. You can become secretive and promiscuous, anger, regret, and guilt and shame, depression. This list could go on, but I want to just show you some of the things that are the hidden emotions that are going on with individuals who have decided to have that abortion. Next slide. So when this happens, we found that in order to suppress those feelings, people use different coping mechanisms until it gets to the point where they can no longer suppress those feelings and it all starts coming out. And I like to use this analogy because that's what it feels like. And like I said, I'm speaking from personal experience. You can only suppress it so much until it can no longer be suppressed. That's the way God has created us. And it's like trying to put plywood over a volcano that's about to erupt. You cannot, it cannot be done. Next slide. So considering those emotional and behavioral problems, you have a man and a woman that decide to get married, but they're carrying these unresolved baggages with them. They come together. Those issues are unresolved. So what do you think is going to happen? A ripple effect occurs. And I found this quote, and I want to preface it with this: not all ripple effects are negative. That's what we want to do, create ripples so that we have an effect on society. This quote was given in regards to having a positive effect on society and building up people. But I do want to say, even though this is great, however, not all ripple effects affects society positively. So let's investigate a little further, especially when children are involved. How is this going to impact that man and woman that you saw on the screen previously? How is that going to impact them if a child or children is involved? They found that psychologists, through interviewing men in post-abortion programs, they admitted that they felt detached, overprotective. There was some marginalization occurring. The men were even abusive and aggressive, as well as some addictive behaviors. And I just want to comment a little bit about some of the symptoms here. Detachment, what does that mean exactly? Well, first of all, they found that fathers, men who were involved in some way, form, or fashion with the abortion decision, when they had their children, could no longer see themselves as a protector or fixer, because that's what men do, protect the family. But when they see this child, they begin to withdraw and say, well, why couldn't I protect my unborn child? Why couldn't I be the man for that unborn child? So they start devaluing themselves and then become detached, and bonding is very difficult, or there is no bonding at all. And some of them just choose to walk away. Or they become overprotective, like some fathers do naturally, especially if a daughter is involved, but they become overprotective, or they marginalize their children. And what do you mean by marginalization? Instead of focusing on the child, giving the child the attention that they need, they become workaholics or get involved in sports activities or some other self-gratifying activities to not focus on the child. Okay, may we have the next slide, Keishan, concerning women. Some of this same, mothers feel like their image, even as a mother, is damaged. I'm not a good mother. I cannot be a good mother, especially what I did to my child. And then that creates a difficulty in bonding. Or it's either unhealthy bonding in the sense that they become overprotective, or they don't bond with the child at all because they feel like they don't deserve that child. If something happens, or when I say overprotective, they feel like something is going to happen to this child because of the decision that I made previously. God is going to punish me. So they become overprotective. And another recourse is to try to feel that emptiness, that feeling of regret and void and hurt by replacing that feeling with a child. So they start having more children in hopes to fill that void, that emptiness there. But the way we are created, nothing or no one can fill that void, because each and every one of us is our own individual person. We have our own individual personality, and the woman finds out that something is still missing, even having a child, and sometimes it's known as the atonement child, some child to cover for that sin that was committed. That atonement child still can't fix the problem. And or they become super moms. I'm gonna do everything I can to give my child the best. She works like men, a workaholic. She's gonna be the best mom ever, because this child deserves what the other child didn't have. Well, let's say, for instance, this particular child starts acting up. Then the woman starts viewing that child as a choice. What do you mean? She looks at the child, if it's cutting up, it's misbehaving, and starts saying things like, I wonder if my aborted child would have been much better than this one. This one is behaving so badly. Maybe I should have aborted that child. So it's a comparison thing going on with it. And also physical abuse is involved, even to the point of death. I can list, this is just a few of the problems that are occurring that we're seeing. The list can go on and on and on and on. But that doesn't mean there isn't hope and there isn't help. How can I say this? As mentioned earlier, I share the same story. I'm not sitting in front of a screen spouting out information that I haven't personally experienced, because at the age of, I was just entering college, and I was in a very unhealthy relationship, became pregnant, and I thought that the only solution to my problem, in order not to bring shame on my family, especially my mother, because I come from a Christian background and I grew up in the church, and I even tell other people my story, people that had heard my story, that I was in the church so much that I thought I was actually born on the church pews. So that's how much involved I was in church. I knew the church language, so there was no way I was going to shame my mother and shame my friends in the church, or even shame myself. So I thought the quick solution was to abort my child. And because of that decision, even though there was a immediate relief, if you will, after the procedure, it wasn't until years down the road, slowly but surely, certain feelings start arising, even to the point where when I heard the word abortion, I wanted to try to disappear. I wished I was Houdini and I could kind of disappear or had some kind of act just so that I wouldn't face the problem, or I felt like people actually could see, they actually could see that I had done it. So I became a little bit paranoid, and it wasn't until I wanted to volunteer one day at a pregnancy resource center, and I felt so inadequate, so hypocritical, and was in tears and shared with the director that I wanted to withdraw from volunteering. It wasn't until she put her arms around me and told me that God loved me and there was help for me that I am now able to even speak about abortion. So I want you to be encouraged. Those that have had that abortion, have made that decision, that yes, our decision to abort, our abortions are irrevocable. The procedure it's irrevocable, but we are not unredeemable. God has not put us on the shelf. He's not angry with us, saying we are of no use. His arms are outstretched. And that's my personal story. His arms outstretched to me saying, no, I'm not angry. You're still redeemable. You still, I can still use you in many, many ways. And he's now using me in ways I've never even imagined. So remember, if you are hurting, if you are experiencing some of the things that I mentioned, please you can go to my website, contact me there. Even those that don't live in the state of Georgia, we have access to other people that can help. And I'm not a licensed counselor, but I have been involved in various in help groups, support groups for years for this very thing. So I thank you, and I welcome any questions. And with that note, I want us to pay close attention to what abortion really does. This is unfortunate, as abortion has damaged the very fabric of our society. As children, mothers, and fathers are devalued, so too is the family, the foundational structure of a civilized society. It does not seem too far-reaching to suggest that abortion has sickened all of our culture. The symptoms seem obvious as men and women struggle with unresolved grief, families break down, and even living children wonder at the precariousness of their existence. This was a quote given by one of the psychologists from the Elliott Institute. Thank you so much, and I welcome any questions at this time.
Thank you so much, Barbara, for sharing. Just a quick reminder, you can put your questions in the Q&A box below, and we will ask our presenter whatever is on your heart or on your mind. Remember that you can also make yourself anonymous if you so choose. And with that said, so we have 2 questions here already. Okay, Barbara, Do you encourage more post-abortion conversations in church? As mostly it's just spoke about as the sin, and you just told us not to do it.
That is my dream, to get into the churches and encourage them to talk about abortion, because the church is seen as such an unsafe place. There is so much fear to be open, but it does need to be an open discussion. There needs the hurting person needs to know, we are the church, we are here for you. There is no condemnation. They need to be shown, not just told there's no condemnation, there's no judgment here, but shown that through the love of Jesus Christ, that's the only way we can do it. There is healing and there is hope. But right now, the churches are seen as unsafe. But that is my dream, that it would get to a point where people feel comfortable enough to, just like they have a divorce care group, they have everything. Divorce care, single ministry for singles, you name it, they have it. But they do not have any type, as far as I know of, an open abortion care group that's not going to be publicized.
And I just like to add that, like I said, I met Barbara through our church when she started the P.A.L M, Post-Abortive Liberating Ministry. And so I think some churches are trying, because your organization is run on the, I don't know what we call it, but
the care group, yes, and the website, yes.
Right. So I think we're starting the journey. And I mean, it would be nice someone could reach out and see how they could start something probably similar in their church, if you were open to helping other people on that journey. We have another question here. What role did I just lose something? Okay, right. What role does the church or society play in helping persons, particularly women, to feel like keeping the child is the best choice? Because the condemnation that comes is real.
Absolutely. And as I said before, the role the church should play, and I cannot emphasize it enough, is first to create a safe place where you feel like, wow, I'm not the only one that's gone through this. There is actually someone that really loves and cares for me, that genuinely loves and cares for me. So yes, it starts with the church, and then the more that's publicized, and we also can direct you to other facilities, like pregnancy resource centers. They also have programs. If you want to keep the child, there is so much information out there. Even I was saying, you can go to my website, not only for if you need help with your decisions you're now experiencing post-abortion problems, but I also have information to share with people that say, well, I really want to keep my child. That's available, more than you would know. That is available, but it's not really talked about because so much shame and fear is there.
Thank you, Barbara. That's something that I always think about as well. And sometimes if you find groups like post-abortive groups, they generally, like Barbara shared, they generally have information on groups that would also be able to help you if you are contemplating keeping the child. If the person is torn in between, then, if you know someone who is thinking of making this decision, possibly directing them to a group like P.A.L M could help them to understand what the repercussions of the decision could be on a long term, but also give them information about keeping the child.
And Keisha Ann, just to add to that, I volunteering in a pregnancy resource center for the number of years that I did, we came across so many young women that were torn with that decision. And it does help a lot with what we were equipped with to share with them, things that they didn't know, because there was such a false picture of what adoption was all about, because what they were going by was what they saw on television. It's nothing like that, nothing at all. So when they became more informed about, oh, wow, so that's what adoption is all about, then the doors started opening more to their heart. And so it does behoove us to just be really sensitive, extremely sensitive to, and listen to what this individual is saying. Listen for what they're not saying, if you follow me.
Thank you. We have, and I think we kind of answered this, where do you go to get healing?
You can go to my website. I have classes twice a year, spring and fall. All you have to do is go to the website. It's strictly confidential, and sign up there and add you to the list. And I just light up about that, because I am absolutely overjoyed and overwhelmed when I see the transformation in these women's lives from day one to the end of the sessions. They are completely transformed, which only God can do. No human being can do it. Only God can do that.
Thank you. All right. How can an individual help someone that has been through an abortion if the woman does not want to talk about it or even admit it?
Well, I have to just put it like this. We can't read minds. So if you don't share with us, I wouldn't know how to help you. But I applaud. It does take courage, because, like I said, I've been there. Because what's in the back of your mind is, I can't talk about it because first of all, how could I have done something like that? And what are they going to think of me now? How could a woman, and we're supposed to be nurturers, how could a woman take her own child's life? So I know what plays in the head. But if that person would just have the courage enough to go to someone and say, hey, this is so hard for me to talk about, but I just want to share this. When you make that initial step and share that information, you'll find yourself, and especially when you know that's a safe person to share with, you'll find yourself being open to getting help.
So the person who, let's say that there's someone who thinks that they know that someone has had an abortion. What would you, how does someone help someone who they think who has had an abortion, but the person will not come out and say it or admit it?
Okay.
How would you go about helping that person?
It depends on how close you are to that person. If you, like I said, if you can, you're saying you thinking or you suspect.
Suspect, yes.
That's going to be the hardest thing, because first of all, like I said, it depends on the type of relationship you have, and you have to approach with caution, be sensitive, and just try to get them to talk. Don't bring it up. Just start talking. If you know this person very well, there are some things, like I said, I've been doing it so long. I can tell sometimes by the body language, if I mention the word abortion, I can sometimes even tell by the body language. that more than likely they have had an abortion. But one thing I will never do is pressure that person into sharing that story or admitting that they've had an abortion, but just make them. What I do is I turn around and I'll just start creating a conversation where I can talk about myself with the hopes of possibly, if it gets to the point where I can share about my abortion experience, that they would feel comfortable enough to say, wait a minute, she's had an abortion. So that's the way you do it.
Right.
Or I would do it.
Right. Well, I like that approach, because if we go back to a part of your presentation when it was talking about the effects, the behavioral and emotional effects, we recognize that this is a deep-seated issue, and the effects can be very deep-seated. And you know, forcing someone to deal with it before the time could be detrimental.
Absolutely.
Someone mentioned in the questions, they said, you know, the condemnation is real. So you may appear, it may appear that you think you're, you know, open arms and, you know, ready to help them heal, but in their mind, there's so much back there that's saying, no, I can't get this out as yet. So, you know, just being available, I think what you're saying, you know, just being available. So when the person feels comfortable and the time is right, they will know that there is someone that they can speak to about it. But until then, allow them to go through the processes. And maybe this is one of those situations where, unfortunately, you have to just help them with the symptoms sometimes until they are at that place to recognize where the symptom is even coming from.
Absolutely. Because if I may share, I've had women in my class that thought they were ready, and it came to a point where emotionally they weren't. So did I say, well, what a shame? Absolutely not. Put my arms around them, loved on them, and said, whenever you're ready, I'm here. Whenever you're ready, I'm here. So that you just have to, like you said, be sensitive and don't take it personal if the person isn't ready to talk about it. Don't take it personal.
I have another question here. What are some of the healthy coping mechanisms for persons who have had abortions? You mentioned participating in sports, which I was thinking could be a healthy way to take your mind off the situation for a while. But outside of support groups, what else is there? I joined late. The person says, sorry, they joined a little late. So.
Well, to be really, I don't know of a healthy coping mechanism to, yes, like I was, to get it off of my mind. It worked for some years because I'm a high achiever, and I was gonna, my dream in life was to become a physician. So I poured myself into education. I was always busy, so I didn't have to think about, or was put so far back in my mind that it was no longer an issue until, if you remember, the volcano. It didn't matter what I did, because the way God has created us, something changes on the inside of us. I could no longer keep suppressing it. There was nothing I could do about it until I got to the point where I went and sought help.
And that question, I like that question, because you and I were talking before, and you know, I was just trying to say, all right, tell me what can we do? What can I give? You know, what can we tell people? You know, I want the meat. I want, you know.
Yes.
But it really is a very intricate issue.
Yes, it is.
Issue. And what I found from listening to you is that until you are ready, nothing is really a healthy coping mechanism. It's just a plaster. That's
exactly
just waiting. And for you, like you shared, it was when everything came to a head, but then you were able to find someone who was able to remind you that you are not unredeemable.
Yes.
And I know that there are people on this session who are not believers, but for those of us who are, I I just want to remind you that you are not unredeemable.
That's
Sorry.
right.
And God is waiting for you to give this over to him so he can also help you on that journey. And as you start to do that, the tools that are given to you to overcome may work that much better. Until then, try to find your peace and recognize that that's in the past. And if you feel ready for help from a therapist or from a group like P.A.L.M Ministry, reach out. For the rest of us, or the rest of the people, who have not been involved in an abortion, I really hope that this session has opened your mind to not being a part of this person's problem, or that drives them further away from their recovery, but that you can be someone that they're willing to speak to. And for those of you who aren't believers, there is hope. When you are ready to speak to someone, please reach out. Please reach out. What are some of the healthy? Oh, sorry.
That's okay.
Do you have any good resources, books, or materials that are beneficial in helping to overcome the guilt and some of the negative symptoms that you mentioned associated with abortion? So books or material like that.
Absolutely. And I will tell you that the most helpful is a support group. It's dynamic because you will find you get to share and sit across and sit with women who share in your same experience. It makes you feel like, wow, I'm really not the only one that's had an abortion. Wow, I'm really not the only one that has had these feelings that I'm feeling. So the more you get involved, if you can, I strongly encourage you to get in a support group. And that's what I do. That's what P.A.L.M does. It's a biblically based support group for women. And my dream is also to find, there are resources for men. I do have resources for men. They're not as publicized as the women, but there are resources for men as well.
Barbara, just a reminder, your website is palmministries.net.
No, it's www.palmministries.com, palmministries.com.
Ministry.com.
And it's such a shame. I see it so much that sometimes I don't remember it myself. So
that happens. Yes. So you're saying that there are books, there are materials, so they can reaching out through P.A.L.M Ministry. You could give them more, but and sometimes I guess, but we isolate so much with these kind of topics or this kind of guilt that
absolutely
don't even take the time sometimes to possibly Google. But off the top of your head, can you think of any kind of book, the title of any book that you found helped with the guilt aspect, or was it not necessarily specifically related to abortion? It's just guilt in general. But once you give yourself permission to heal from this, then the other material that you're using.
I can think of, they're curriculum per se, but the books will help, and there are curriculums that are tailored around support, post-abortion support groups.
Okay.
Some women, you know what? If you will contact me, because there is a area on my website where if you just want information, I'll be happy to send you the list of the books that I have or the curriculum. that I have that would help with the guilt. But I cannot stress enough, if you can get into a support group, it's amazing, because one of the topics that I deal with is guilt. So you work through that. It's just amazing what happens.
Okay. Thank you. All right.
You're welcome.
Here we go. If I have had multiple abortions, is there any, sorry, before I go there, I just wanted to say that what I hear you saying is that this is a journey that is difficult to go alone.
Absolutely.
Definitely encourage, if books, if where you are at, if where the person is at right now is still very private, books are helpful, but this is a journey that you want support to go
right along. Absolutely. Okay. And I do understand that some women are still it's so much shame there and so much guilt that it's very hard to break out of that. But that's why I said in the beginning, if you could just put that one foot forward, because fear is abundant in itself. If you can just put that one foot forward and find a support group, you will be amazed at what happens.
Lovely. All right. If I have had multiple abortions, is there any negative physical damage that is done to my body, particularly as it relates to future pregnancies?
It has been found that, yes, there have been, even with women without multiple abortions, there have been some women that could no longer carry their future children. Something happens, yes, physically with the woman. And it's even more increased with those that's had multiple abortions.
Okay, thank you. I just want to add to that one, to also be careful for not, the guilt and the self-condemnation.
Right. Yes.
Because there are women who, without having abortions, find it difficult to become.
Absolutely.
There are a lot of other things too.
Right.
So yes, it may be as a result of the abortion, something may have gone wrong. With all surgeries, there's so many times you go into, fix kidney, and I don't know, I'm making stuff up. But, the point is that a lot of times things go wrong. So also things to seek healing for.
Thank you, Keisha Ann, for adding that in. So yes, it's just not relative to women who have had an abortion. There are women who also experience that, but it's just a higher risk, increased risk with those that have had multiple abortions. Yes, but by all means, that can also make a woman feel very guilty and beat herself up.
And so in that case, don't, I would suggest, being open to go to your physician to make sure, because you could have it in your mind that this is the reason when there's something else that is, fixable.
Right.
So don't stand in fear. All right. How can I help my husband feel better about me sexually once he knows I may have had an abortion?
How can you make your husband feel better once he knows? Well, the question would have to be, first of all, how do you feel about sharing it? What is it in you that's not allowing you to share it? Do you feel like you may need to go through some healing process before you can share it? Because I was so afraid to share that with my husband when we first got married, because before we married, we had the discussion and I knew how he felt about abortion. So I was so afraid to tell him. And I'm going to speak from a Christian point of view, because that's all I know. I'll say God fixed it where I didn't have to share it, but while I was going through a program, I forgot and left my materials sitting on the table because I usually would hide them. He saw them. And everything, I played the story in the back of my head. Oh God, he is going to divorce me because now he knows that I had an abortion. It was complete opposite. You know what he did instead? He put his arms around me and said, you know, you can talk to me about anything because I love you. To me, that was what God was saying to me. This is how God was loving me. So don't fix a story in your head about how you think a person is going to react or how your husband is going to react. I can only say you got to trust God in the process. And those who are not believers, I don't know how to say who else could you trust. I just don't know. Keisha Ann, maybe you can help me with that one.
I would definitely say that remember that your husband is also human, and you're going to have to give him space to adjust and to go through his process and possibly his healing as well. It may be something that if you are at the point of seeing a therapist, or if you or your husband are are open to that, then it may be a discussion that you would want to have in a group session, so that this third party can help with communication, but also help plan a strategy based on what they're seeing each person going through. And I love your testimony, Barbara, and I can see that God was really in a place to help, place for you to heal, and he was setting things up for you.
Yes.
And that's a beautiful testimony. All of our testimonies are going to be different. And I use the word testimony from a Christian standpoint, but all of our stories are going to be different. And you may be in a different space. Your spouse may be in a different space. So going in prepared and giving that person the time and the space that they may need in order to deal with it. But prior to that, as Barbara said, working on yourself. Are you ready? Are you as stable as you can be to handle what may come? What may come. But even through that journey, there is still help, because groups, as Barbara said, the support groups will be able to help you deal with, what may be coming and help walk you through. But there is strength in the support system that is out there. And, when the time is right, we hope that the love in that union will stand firm during that time. But allow the person, show grace to the person as well, because it may be a lot for them to take. That's all I got.
That's good. That's good.
Did volunteering help in your post-abortion journey towards healing?
Yes, absolutely. Because had I not, here we go, it was all set up. God knew what it was going to take. And in order to volunteer, one of the requirements was if you had an abortion, you had to go through their post-abortion program. So it was through that program that I received my healing.
And here you are on the other side helping.
Who would ever thunk it? Who would ever thunk it? Yeah.
There you go. All right. Oh, we're coming down. 3 more, and then we're
okay.
Yeah. Is there information to show that women who may not feel guilty about having an abortion still have trauma or suffer later in sexual relations, even though even though they themselves feel they are fine?
As I stated, those symptoms, there are various symptoms. She may not feel guilty, but she may feel traumatized by something else. She may not feel, like I said, she may not feel guilty, but she may have deep regret, or there could be deep depression. And they have found that if a person already was dealing with depression prior to an abortion, that abortion increases or makes it even worse for a person that's been depressed. It increases the depression along with other psychological issues before.
Okay. I like that question, because that question brings out the heart of what bitter or sweet sex in marriage is about.
Right.
It's about the blind spots, the recognition that sometimes there are things that are happening in our life, or we're stuck in certain ways, and we're unaware that it may be related to
absolutely
unresolved traumas or issues from our past. And so for the person who posted this question, as with everything, yes, there are going to be a lot of persons who do not feel guilty. But if you were a part of the sexual trauma session that we did in the a few weeks ago, or speaker then, Chandra Dew, mentioned muscle memory. And in that, she was speaking about you have forgiven, you have overcome, you believe that you are okay. You are no longer triggered by certain words or actions, certain words, but your body still remembers, and therefore you may respond in a particular way and not remember that that was actually associated to the issue. And so when we were speaking about sexual trauma, it was even the tightening, the tensing, whether or not this is even something pleasurable that you even want to do, because it may be linked in the back of your mind, in the back to the trauma. And it's not until going through the process of, and this is my encouragement, go through the process and just be certain that there is nothing lingering, that you're not blindsided by this thing that you believe that intellectually you have overcome.
It's also, I meant to, it's also included in the chart. I kind of skimmed over it, but that is one of the symptoms, is difficulty with intimacy, or difficulty with sexual intimacy. Those are also some of the symptoms that could be associated with an abortion experience.
Okay. Is your group open to men? This is our final question. So if anyone has anything else to add, now is the time to put that question in. We're wrapping up after this. Is your group open to men, or is that something you have planned for the future, Barbara?
I would love for men and women to sit in my class, but it would take a man to facilitate that kind of group, because men don't react, or they don't talk like women talk. And so that's a plan in the future. I'll put it like that. Yeah.
Do you know, so following on that question, do you know of any post-abortive male support groups?
Yeah, I have the information. Yes, I do.
Okay, so to the person who posed this question, the P.A.L.M ministry doesn't directly work with men right now. If they contact you, you can send them in the right direction.
Yes.
Or mail.
Yes.
So once again, that's www.pamministry.com.
Yes.
Okay. And that was our final question.
Okay, it's two. I think I see some chats. Some people are in the chat. Do you see that, Keisha?
Let me see.
Keisha Ann? We missed them.
Oh, no questions in the chat. Just
Okay, just
thanking
chatting.
you. Thank you for
Okay.
this great reminder, confirmation that total healing can take place. Thanks also for sharing your story, Barbara.
Oh, you're welcome.
And just saying that this was helpful information, and thanks for sharing.
Thanks. I'd like to say this on that note. Remember, forgiveness is immediate. Healing is a process.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And with that, we encourage you all to be a part of the healing process.
Yes, yes.
Seek your healing, fight for your healing. It may be hard, it may be rough, it may be challenging, but there is support, there is help, and you are worth it.
Yes, you are.
And for those of you who can, please be available to help those in need of healing and in need of an ear. Remember that you can't force someone if it's not their time.
That's right.
Just be available. Say a prayer and be available.
Amen.
Thank you so much for joining us all.
Okay.
And we have one more topic coming up on Friday. Sorry, that's not true. Thursday. So the next one is going to be on a Thursday, July 22nd. And we will be looking at pornography and masturbation in the Bittersweet Sex in Marriage series. We will have, our speaker will be Pastor Israel Piotr from the Victory World Church, also in Georgia. And looking forward to you joining us again. Tell a friend, register early so that you have the Zoom link. And thank you so much. Remember, you can reach out to Barbara at www.palmministry.com. Get your resources there. And locally, I am sure that there are resources if we start to look for it.
Yes.
Until I started speaking to Barbara, I did not recognize how many post-abortive support groups there were out there. Unfortunately, you're going to have to seek.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Have a wonderful
day. Thank you
for joining us. Thank you so much, Barbara. That was.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.